Hey guys, this is Locke. In this video, I'm going to be doing an in-depth review of Magnus. It might be a little bit hard for people to pull Magnus right now because he's not on any featured banners and he has not been on any featured banners. I got spooked by him and I was trying to pull someone else, but he seems like a pretty fantastic character, and I'm sure his banner will come up sooner or later. I wanted to do a review because I've been playing him a lot and I feel like I'm pretty comfortable with his playstyle that I can confidently talk about him. So although he is his class is a tank, he doesn't function like other tanks. He's a little bit different to play. If you compare him with people like uh, Maita. Maita functions as a tank because she has this guard skill, so she can take damage for your allies. So she can plant her next to your ally, and when the enemy attacks your ally, Maita will take the damage instead. Now, Magnus does not work that way. He doesn't have any kind of block skills anywhere on his skill tree, so instead he functions a little bit differently. You can even consider him a bruiser instead of a tank because I think that's a better way to describe him. But instead of taking damage for your ally, what he instead does is kind of provide similar to a global attack down debuff on all the enemies. That way it helps all of your allies stay alive longer. That's basically his function. His kit basically revolves around that idea. So anyway, let's dive into it. Let's start with this trait. So remember, keep in mind that the main idea about him is to decrease the attack of enemies. So his trait actually does that already, and since it's a trait, it's always active. You don't have to take something else out to put that in. All allies, not all allies, all enemies within 3 tiles of himself have 8% less attack and defense. This goes all the way up to 15% at the 5th star. In addition, he also gets a little bit more attack when he's attacking enemies. So at 2 stars, 30% of his 30% of his defense gets added to his attack when he's attacking. The main part of this trait is the aura-like skill. It actually does function as an aura, by the way. So if you have another unit with an aura, like for example, if you have Convallaria with this, this will not stack with Magnus's aura. So since this one is 10% and Magnus is 8%, if you have both of them next to each other and an enemy is affected by both of them, the enemy will have minus 10% attack from Solemnity, and it will have minus 8% defense from Magnus's aura, Magnus's trait. So that's how it functions. And if you get this to 3 stars, it's already better than Gloria's aura anyway, right? Because you get minus 12% attack and defense at 3 star. So just keep that in mind that he already provides a minus 12% attack within 3 squares of himself. And now we're going to go into his skills and take a look at how else he can complement that. So the rank 1 skills, okay, I think Resolve is a pretty good skill. And a lot of people have been talking about how they think it's like pretty weak. The reason it's weak is it's because the translation is not correct. Basically what this really does is that whenever Magnus' health gets reduced to 0 and he dies, he gets 5% of his health back. It's basically like one revive, automatically revives once a battle. That's what it does. So it's it's not bad, and it's definitely better than offensive stance, especially for a tank type bruiser kind of person. You don't really want to give up any of your defense, so I would not be taking offensive stance unless you really need to, you're under a very huge time limit and you really need to get as much attack in as possible, something like that. But I feel like it's very, very niche. I think Resolve is probably the better skill to take, but either way, you can actually not even take either of them until you need to use them. The reason you wouldn't take either of them is because you will find that you actually, his slots are, you're using his 3 slots for other things, that it's going to be very difficult for you to even have the space to put the rank 1 skills. So let's move to the rank 3 skills where, his bread and butter comes from. So rank 3 on the right side is called Cry of Victory, and this is, in my opinion, the most important skill that he has. So what this does, whenever he defeats an enemy, Oh, well, he doesn't even have to defeat it. Anyone on your team can defeat. Whenever an enemy is defeated within 2 tiles around him, he inflicts minus 20% attack to all enemies within 5 tiles, and he gives a global buff of 20% increase damage to all your allies. Okay, so that is a pretty good skill, right? Like, I mean, 5 tiles is a huge space. That'll probably cover, like, a good chunk of your enemies, and you can keep casting this like once every turn, once every round, right? So it's easy to keep this up. Although the condition at the beginning seems a bit difficult because you have to make sure that you defeat an enemy every turn. But thankfully, there's another way to actually proc the effect as well. If you keep reading, it says that this will also be immediately triggered before using Mountain Breaker. So let's go see Mountain Breaker. Mountain Breaker is actually its default skill. This does 150% damage, and it's a 1 range. And it does a bunch of other effects, but that's not important. Like, the main important thing is as soon as he uses it, before he uses it, he automatically casts Cry of Victory. So that means you don't have to defeat anyone. Sometimes I attack a rock because I don't need to like do any damage. I don't care. I just go and use Mountain Breaker on a rock to start the battle off by having all enemies within 5 tiles having minus 20% attack, especially in like harder stages. These enemies are doing a lot of damage. Because he's a tank type character, he has pretty high speed at 231. So oftentimes he's the first one on my team to go, and right away I go in and use this if I can. It doesn't even matter. Like, sometimes he's not able to survive getting attacked by 3 people in an enemy team, so I just attack. I attack a rock. Sometimes I attack my own flag, like Gloria's flag. She throws it down. He goes and attacks it because I really need to use the skill because I think it's really important. This Cry of Victory to apply this global buff to my team, and more importantly, the 5 tile debuff to enemies, because I think that's really, really important. But the problem now is that I'm already using 2 skills. Like, I need both these skill slots to do this, so I only have 1 skill slot left. And a lot of times I feel like if you have Magnus, you will probably want to bring this leader skill, the Blood and Steel. There are a few reasons for this. One of the reasons is that he actually pairs really well with Dandelion, because as you can see, Dandelion and him, they're both on the Fortitude. So Dandelion will benefit from the second part of Magnus's aura. Meanwhile, Dandelion will also benefit from his own aura. So Dandelion will be having access to 2 different auras. He's not going to get. Okay, let me go read the aura to make this more clear. He is so this skill gives you 10% attack and 20% defense, and then I'm not going to read the rest of it right now. I'm just going to call it secondary effect. Okay, so Dandelion, his own aura will have something similar. It will have 10% attack, 20% defense, and then a secondary effect. So the 10% attack and 20% defense is not going to stack. You're only going to get 1 instant of it. But the secondary effect, Dandelion is going to get both of them. Okay? And anyone else who's on the Fortitude team and on the Ira team will also be able to get both the secondary effect. Now, the secondary effect that he has is he takes he decreases the damage taken by 10%. So he makes the whole team a little bit more sturdy, which is great. Well, not the whole team, but everyone who shares, Fortitude, 10% less damage, which I think is good. And then this is a really interesting effect. All your units, whenever your health decreases, you automatically take a little bit of a debuff. So when you're healthy and your health is above 70%, you are like normal state. You don't suffer from any debuffs. But once you go below 70%, you are in an injured state and you take 20% more damage, and the damage that you deal is also reduced by 20%. Now, his part of his secondary effect is that he cancels out that injured state. I mean, your health will still be below 70%, but you will no longer be doing reduced damage, and you will no longer be taking taking increased damage either. So I think that's a pretty good buff to have, because I mean, you will be taking damage. It's easy to get your health below 50%, right? So having that, I think, is actually a really good buff. So I can see a lot of people, If you have Magnus, I can see a lot of people using this leader buff on him because I think it's uh, it provides a pretty substantial effect. If you have Dantaline, now Dantaline's effect will also apply to Magnus as well. And Dantaline's effect is that whenever you have 3 debuffs on an enemy, you take 20%. The enemy takes 20% more damage, and Magnus applies that debuff to in a 5 tile area already. It's very easy to get debuffs with Magnus. So I feel like if you're playing Magnus, you'll probably structure him with these 3 skills. So that's why keep that in mind that it is really hard to fit in other things like resolve. I think resolve is a good skill to have, but I think it's just really hard to fit that in. So keep that in mind as well. Now let's keep going. Let's go to rank 5. So in the rank 5, he has 2 different reaction abilities, and I think hardening is the best one simply because I just don't really like the strike back effects. I feel like it's a bit lackluster. I mean, he performs a strike back, so what is that, 70%? Okay, I guess it's 100%. It doesn't say Gloria's strike back is like 70% attack, but this one seems to be 100% attack. But it's just one attack, right? And then it doesn't matter. I feel like that's a bit lackluster compared to anything that adds defensively. So his hardening skill decreases his damage taken by 8%. If you add this with his aura, like his leadership aura, whatever, you already have a minus 18% damage he takes flat, right? So I think that's already pretty good. So on top of that, after being attacked, he gets damage reduction 2 for 2 turns, which decreases the damage he takes additionally by another 20%. So that's already, after he gets hit, that's already a minus 38% reduction of further attacks for 2 turns. I think that's a pretty good effect. I think it's much better than Bloodthirsty Axe, in my opinion. We missed over one skill, and I actually find this skill really useful as well, unfortunately. And the reason it's unfortunate is because I just mentioned the problem of not having enough slots. I feel like this Forceful Cast skill is actually really interesting, especially in places where you are fighting multiple enemies, right? Like Tower, for example, right? And even like the 3rd boss stage, Weaponry Trial 3. So you can basically pick up an enemy and then throw them, which already just seems fun, It seems like such a fun style of playing. We can pick up an enemy and throw them between 3 and 4 tiles, and then they will do AoE damage to everyone in that place. And the reason that this is good, this could be good in the 3rd weaponry trial, is because it might just help you to position the enemies so that you can do an AoE and wipe them all out, right? But I mean, you can only cast it once every 3 turns, but sometimes you'll find something in the middle of somewhere. You can, while you're picking up and throwing it, you can still do some damage to the boss because it is, you do have a certain amount of time before you have to kill the boss. So you're still doing some damage, but you're also positioning the enemies to be able to be wiped out with AoE attacks as well. Additionally, it also inflicts move -1, so it'll be a little bit harder for them to come back to attack you once you use the skill. I think it's a really fun and pretty good skill, but I feel like this is better. Cry of Victory is, I think, better, and it's kind of his playstyle in my opinion. So that's why I would recommend going this way, using Cry of Victory and Mountain Breaker. Maybe for the 3rd slot, you can use that instead if you really want. You can use the Enemy Toss, whatever it's called, Forceful Cast. So you can use that as the 3rd slot instead of the Aura if you really want to. But I'm having a hard time thinking of that or imagining that. So what about the rank 7 skill? This is also an interesting skill. I think it's also a really good skill. This one, it does 120% attack, and then it inflicts Vulnerable 2 for 3 turns. Vulnerable 2 increases the damage taken by 20%. This is great, especially for boss fights where you're struggling to beat them within a set amount of time. Like if I had trouble with the boss fight and I couldn't beat it in enough time, I would use a Castilia to unlock this. and take the aura out, because sorry, the leadership aura out, because I feel like this would really add to the damage taken by the boss. There isn't many skills that does vulnerable, so this would stack with, like, say, defense down debuffs, right? So you have a defense down debuff, and then you have a vulnerable 2 debuff as well, so you're actually like multiplying the damage that this boss is taking. So if I'm having trouble to kill the boss in time, this is probably the route I would go. I would be using the skill instead. So he is a character that has 5 really good skills, if you include the leadership aura. So it's going to be tough to decide which way you want to play him, but also opens him up the possibility of doing multiple things. Like, instead of using him as a debuff, or maybe you have somebody else that does like attack down debuffs or something, right? And you're instead using him as like an offensive type bruiser. So if you're doing that, then you could go the other way. You could use this skill. It does 120% attack. It inflicts vulnerable 2. You might, I guess you could also go with offensive stance if you really want to get as much damage out of him as possible, although I wouldn't really recommend it. But there is multiple ways of playing him now. In the rank 9, I don't really like skills that does AoE damage for a basic skill, especially if it's reduced damage, because you're basically reducing his damage from 100% to 30 to 70%, right? And I don't like that. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just a me thing. Maybe other people do like these AoE skills, but I typically don't really like it. So that's why I chose the Feverish Attack, which gives you 20% lifesteal. The lifesteal isn't too much. It only counts for basic attacks, but it adds up over time. If you have a healer that is not able to heal him to full health because you're taking too much damage from the bosses, this is going to be able to supplement the healer's heal. And then, when he normal attacks, he also gets 20% of whatever damage he does. It could be like, if he's attacking the enemy for, I don't know, 1,000 damage with this normal attack, he'll get 200 health back when he does this. So I think it's better than the AoE because, as I mentioned, AoE is a damage decrease. I like Gloria's AoE. If you've seen my video on Gloria, I recommended you take Gloria's AoE because after you throw the flag, it actually becomes a sword skill, which increases the multiplier. It goes from 100 to 130%. So that's the reason why I like Gloria's AoE, because you can switch it to a single target and it does even more than a basic attack. But with Magnus, I feel like the feverish attack is the way to go. Now, rank 11, I don't know what it is, but I feel like both of these skills are not that great. If you are going very offensive, I guess Sharpened Blade is okay, because, Sharpened Blade increases its damage output by 10%. Okay, sure, that's extra damage. Why not, right? And then it increases the character's strike back by 30%, which, he only has one skill that strikes back. He only has the Bloodthirsty Axe, right? So you have to take this reaction. It increases his damage from 70% to 100%. No, he already does 100%. So it increases from 100% to 130%. But he has to get hit, and it could only be activated once per round. So I don't know. To me, that just seems lackluster. So this skill most likely would just be increasing his overall damage by 10%, which is okay. If you want to really go offensive, I guess you could go with offensive stance, Bloodthirsty Axe, and Sharpened Blade, or maybe you would go. Wait, how much is the? Sorry, I meant offensive stance, Crushing Blast, and Sharpened Blade. That way you can increase your Crushing Bash's damage as much as possible. You might also want to use Crushing Blade and Mountain Breaker, because both of those are skills and they're both on cooldowns. So I don't know. To me, it just doesn't really seem that great. I think there are so many other heroes that are more offensively situated. So I would more play him for his unique stuff, which is, his debuff aura, and then the bruiser kind of attacks, not just the straight out offensive attacks. What about his right side skill? So Iron Chariot, I think, is situated to do a lot of damage. Like, if you can pump his defense up really high, you can do 300% of defense, going all the way up to 200% of attack, which I think is one of the highest modifiers I've seen on a 4-star skill. The highest I've seen before was like 180%. So this is really high, but it does a lot of damage. But again, like there are other heroes that I would probably choose instead to do this. Whereas this guy, he already has 5 skills that are really, really good in the role that he does. So would I really give up all that for a 4-star, for a 4 energy, high damage skill? Probably not. So I feel like there's going to be a limited use for these two. So because it's limited use, what I usually do when I come across this situation is that I get the rank up. I would get rank 10, I would get rank 11, and then I would just not pick a skill until there's a time when I need to get a skill. I would not pick it. I should have done that for this one too, like for the rank one, because I haven't used Resolve. But anyway, it's too late now. But that's what I would recommend. Like when you get up to rank 11, if you don't feel like you're going to use either of these skills right now, just leave it until a point in time when you do need to use it. If you don't pick something, you do lose a little bit of stats. Like the rank 11 skill, you get an extra 3% attack. So until you pick the skill, you will not be getting the extra 3% attack. For me, that's worth the trade-off of getting the wrong one and then using the Castilia to get the other one, which is still for very limited use. So that's why I usually would still not pick it until I need to. But anyway, that's my advice. If you really feel like you need the 3% attack, I don't really know which one you would pick. I mean, I guess they're both like very situational. Maybe you can refer to other guides and other players to see which one they pick, because I can't really see a use case for either of these. So maybe pick the one that you like the most or something, and then just to get the 3% attack, and then use the skills that I mentioned before, which is like this one, and then Mountain Breaker. For weapons, I mean, I don't have the best weapons, so I'm just using what I have. People keep asking me, even on the Gloria's video, they're like, how do you equip her? And how I equip them is also dependent on every single fight, because like right now, as you can see, I'm having this guy more built like a bruiser. So I have the Silence of the Hermit, which reduces the damage he takes by 10%, which stacks with the 18% that he gets from how I built him already. So he's minus 28% just from this. Sometimes I even use this one, the Coexist Armor, to bring that up from 28 to 28 to 38%. Other times, I mean, the Coexist Armor is on someone else who's taking more damage. So I have the Mystery Guardian instead, which increases his P defense by 5%. For the weapon, I think there's a really good weapon that can dispel buffs on attack, and I've heard that that's really powerful because later on a lot of enemies have all these different buffs that you want to get rid of. So I don't have that legendary. That's the reason why I built this one instead, which I think is pretty good for how he is. Increases his defense, and then it converts part of his defense into his attacks. It increases attack even more. It stacks really nicely with his trait, which also increases his attack based on his defense. But because I don't have the axe that dispels, like removes buffs, I also built out the anti-magic axe, and this has helped me in the I think it was the 3rd weaponry trial where the boss is getting buffs when you defeat the minions. So by using this, I'm able to strip the buffs out, and so I find this useful. Whenever I'm going into that trial, I always switch and bring that axe. Otherwise, if I just need more damage, more defense, I bring the one that I've equipped him right now. So I want to talk a little bit about maybe the team composition. This part is like really difficult to talk about because everyone has different characters. But for me personally, because I feel like he goes really well with Gloria. Gloria is also built as a sort of like sturdy kind of unit. Like it's also like a bruiser type, right? So pairing Magnus and Gloria together, I usually don't need to bring a tank. They both can go up, and they both have different skills that buff defenses and also reduce attacks on the enemies. So together they both become like even more sturdy, and Gloria also benefits from Magnus's aura buff. So I don't actually even bring Gloria's leader buff anymore because I don't feel the trade-off for her leader buff secondary effect is good enough to not use one of her other skills. But they're both, using both of them, I don't usually need to bring a dedicated tank that can cover, because I don't really need to cover. I can usually take the damage with these two, and they are usually okay to last. Like so far, maybe when I get even higher, more difficult content, maybe I will need to use, dedicated tanks. But for now, I feel like this is pretty good. I've also been experimenting with Garcia as well. If you saw my Garcia video, I feel like she's underlooked. I feel like she's actually could be really powerful if you, look at my video and you'll see what I'm talking about. But I think she's pretty good. So I've been able to play him, Garcia, and Gloria on the same team and bring them with the healer, and then for the 5th slot, just whatever else I need. Maybe more damage, maybe more range, or maybe another support of some kind. But these three together can function as sort of like a bruiser damage hybrid roles. And that's how I've been playing him. But I can also see a lot of people playing him together with Ira teams, because as I mentioned before, him and Dandelion both are on both Fortitude and Ira teams. So you can bring characters for both of them, and they will both buff each other with both of their secondary effects. And if you really feel like you want to bring something else, not the Blood and Steel skill, you can also do that by bringing him with Dandelion and using Dandelion's aura, and have some other skill for him instead. Maybe the vulnerability skill, because I think that's probably one of the other ones that I would put. It would definitely be between the vulnerability skill, especially for boss fights. I would use this one, the Crushing Bash. If it's not for a boss fight, if it's for a group of enemies, I would probably bring the Forceful Cast, because I think this is really interesting. So anyway, that's it for my review on Magnus. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions or comments, leave your comments below and I will get back to you. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.